Welcome to our Spring Courageous Conversations session here, and my name is Marty Mesner. I'm an associate dean here in the Walker College of Business, and one of the initiatives in my office is our diversity and inclusion projects that we're working on, and the work we're doing in the college's culture to make sure that we have an inclusive culture where everybody belongs. So I'm here just to introduce the person who is going to introduce other people. So I will go ahead and welcome you. Thank you for being here. I'm looking at the participants, and we have over 100 attendees, so I'm getting nervous as I watch that number go up. And I will, without further ado, pass the baton over to Jamie Parson, who is our Chief Diversity Officer on campus. Used to be housed in our building, was one of the business faculty, and it's just great to see her again. Got a chance to see her in person before we went virtual with this. Jamie, thank you for what you're doing on campus. Thank you for leading all of us in this so important initiative. Thanks for being the impetus behind, I think, the very first Courageous Conversations we had, and for helping us maintain this tradition over the years. So thank you. We appreciate you. We're delighted that you're here, and I'll pass the floor over to you.
Thanks, Marty. It is my goal to break Zoom with each event that we hold. So I look forward to seeing that number go up. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Spring Courageous Conversations panel discussion. As Marty said, I'm Jamie Parsons, serving as Interim Chief Diversity Officer here at App State. And the Courageous Conversations program really began several years ago when the initial Walker College of Business Diversity Advisory Team was approached by a student who was concerned about personal and professional risk associated with navigating difficult conversations around discrimination and bias as they entered into their career. So I think it was in February of 2017, we held our first Courageous Conversation panel in Peacock Hall. And we had business alumni come and share their experiences and advice on speaking with colleagues about race and implicit bias in the workplace. And I think at that time, that terminology was so new to us. We were all trying to soak in, like, how are we talking about this with this new set of language? Since then, the Walker College of Business has graciously supported this opportunity and collaborated with various organizations over the years. I think our first year we partnered with Kappa Alpha Psi, and we've done this in collaboration with Black History Month, or in celebration of Black History Month. And Courageous Conversations has really evolved into an opportunity to engage with some of our most dynamic alumni and national leaders to talk about their experiences with discrimination, privilege, and bias, but also to share their stories of resilience, empowerment, and the impact of using your voice to support individuals of various identities throughout your career. This dialogue has really shifted over the years from whether or not we should be having these conversations at work to which tools and competencies we can bring to the table to facilitate these conversations. This year's theme, How to Have Bold, Inclusive Conversations, is a timely discussion as we continue to grapple with the complex histories of our past, current societal changes, and really the desire to build a better future. Special thanks to the Walker College of Business, Interim Dean Sandy Benoit, Associate Dean Dr. Marty Mesner, College of Business Inclusive Excellence team, Meredith, who champions a lot of programming that we have been able to offer throughout the college for several years, for their continued leadership and commitment to seeing this discussion continue from year to year. I'd also like to thank our moderators, who are also Fleming scholars, Amaya and Cece, and our panelists, Trustee James Reeves and Danielle Gray. It's a special treat to have you all here today. Meshach Cleary, who I first learned about via a podcast, so I'm really excited to hear his thoughts, and Brenda Young, who is a fantastic business owner here in North Carolina. And so thank you for dedicating your time this evening to this important conversation. And I think I'm turning it over to Maya and Cece to tell us a little bit about yourselves and then to kick off the facilitation of this conversation.
All right, can you all hear me okay? Okay, my name is Amaya Crawford. I'm a sophomore here at App State. I am double majoring in international business and marketing with a Spanish minor. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm also a member of the Omicron Kappa chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Celeste Ramsier. I'm a senior supply chain management major, and I will be graduating in May.
Alrighty, well, this event has two parts. At the end of the discussion panel, we'll provide you with an opportunity to break into smaller groups for Q&A and discussion. Please note, if you are attending this event for class credit, credit will only be awarded for participating in both of tonight's events.
And if you have any questions, feel free to send them directly to Amaya Crawford or myself in the chat. The participant chat feature is open, but please be aware that all chats are accessible by the hosts of this event.
All right, and without further ado, panelists, you all can introduce yourselves. So why don't we start with James Reeves and Danielle Gray?
I'm James Reeves, and I am a 1993 graduate of the Walker College of Business. And thank you for inviting me tonight. And I do work with Truist Life Insurance Services, and I'm glad to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Gray. I feel like I'm an honorary App State alum because I'm married to James. But I am currently the Chief Legal Officer at Walgreens Boots Alliance, and I'm delighted to be here with you.
And Brenda Young.
Yes, hi, I'm Brenda Young. I am a graduate of Winthrop University, and I am the owner and head baker of Bee's Sweet Eats here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm also the benefits assistant for Rock Hill School District.
That my cue?
Yes, you're good.
All right. Hey everyone, my name is Mishai Clary. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm the Vice President of Global Operations for the nutrition and health equipment business for an industrial manufacturing company, SPX Flow. I've spent the last couple of decades in industrial manufacturing. Grew up in New York, went to Temple University, and currently completing executive MBA at Yale School of Management.
Awesome. Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. So I had the privilege of asking the first question. How have your opportunities and experiences been shaped by your identities and the way that others perceive you? I'm going to direct this one to J.K. Reeves. I'm going to call on somebody.
All right, I'll take the first one. I grew up in a non-diverse environment in Durham, North Carolina. All Black elementary school, all Black middle school, all Black high school. And I knew when it was time to choose my college, I knew I wanted a more diverse type of situation. And so I visited Appalachian State and fell in love with the place. And I can't tell you how many experiences I've gotten from Appalachian in terms of just meeting more diverse individuals. And it really prepared me for the workforce because I can remember going into the College of Business and being in the big lecture halls, and I would be in the front because I needed to focus on the professor and every word that he or she was saying. And I look around me and I'd be the only Black in the classroom. And so working collaboratively with white students and just befriending them. I also participate in athletics, and Appalachian really helped me to go out into the workforce because it gave me experience being in diverse situations, which I didn't have growing up in Durham. So, and right now, working with Truist, there are not a lot of Blacks with Truist. And so it was great to have that experience at Appalachian, which prepared me for the workforce.
Would any other panelists like to take a stab at that question by any chance as well?
I'm happy to go next since I'm sitting here, but a similar experience. I think college for me was the first opportunity to really be surrounded by not only people of different racial backgrounds, but I grew up in a working class community in New York, and was the first in my family to go to college. And my first exposure to people with a lot of money was actually in college, and so I think for me also, college was an experience that really opened my eyes to people from different backgrounds and different points of views. And I think it was really instructive and informative. And, I always, whenever I'm on panels like this and I'm asked to give advice to students, I encourage them to sort of seek that out, because in the workforce, you actually might be surrounded by a lot of people like you, right? I'm a lawyer, so I work a lot every day with lawyers. If you're in finance, you're working a lot every day with people in the financial profession. And so college was just this great community of people with different views and different perspectives. And sometimes it's sort of easy to just, sort of stick to what you know. But I think for me, it was really formative and instructive in branching out.
Yeah, if I can maybe add to that, similarly, maybe or maybe not coincidentally, I grew up in Bronx, New York, in a predominantly Black and Hispanic community, and I had that experience mostly through middle school, and I actually went through a high school program where I boarded in Massachusetts, and I was only one of two, African Americans in my graduating class of over 400 people. So it wasn't a small school by any means. So that was quite a culture shock, you're fairly young. You think about at 14 years old, when you're still sort of growing and developing and building habits. That was quite the culture shock for me. When I went to Temple University, it was actually a perfect balance. A lot of people think of Temple as a HBCU because of the amount of diversity at that university, but it is a predominantly white institution. So it was a great balance for me personally, and not knowing, as I entered corporate America, starting my career with GE and then going to other industrial manufacturing companies, it actually helped me, I think, adjust into corporate America, better than I likely would have without those experiences, and also better than others who, would have stayed in neighborhoods similar to my own, and then, possibly even go to HBCUs or historically Black colleges, universities, and then enter the space where there aren't many people that can relate to us culturally. So I think that helped me adapt, but it also helped me appreciate just how big of a challenge and a gap there is in those spaces for folks who weren't as privileged as me to have that opportunity. I represent the minority within the minority in those experiences. So I'm sure we'll get into more later, in discussions. But I think there is a really significant connection between that background and that upbringing, and the things that I noticed, not just in terms of the language that's spoken within corporate America, which is very different than the language in the communities that I came from, but the social activities, and those sort of things are a big deal, and oftentimes have a large impact on the type of exposure that folks get into organizations. So I think what I learned throughout that time is that there's a lot of shifting and molding and adapting to the space that wasn't created with my culture in mind, where my family came from, which is the Caribbean, as well as where I grew up in that neighborhood. And so that was a pretty big learning for me in terms of how I was shaped. And in present state, I focus a lot on one, being very authentically true to myself, and also encouraging and creating space for others to be able to be their authentic selves, to be able to deliver that value within corporate spaces.
Just briefly, I would, agree with everything that's been said. My background, it's similar. Yeah, you have 3 cities. I'm originally from Gadsden, South Carolina. And so you have 3 cities where all 3 of these cities are going to one particular high school. And that's the only high school in the area. So the majority of the students are African-American. We had a few Hispanic and white, but my experience at Winthrop was really where diversity came into play. And it was something that they really honed in on, being cultured and being a part of diversity. Winthrop is one of the universities in South Carolina that has the highest minority rate in the state of South Carolina. And so even though it may, by the pamphlet, look very white for most people, on the campus is very diverse. So it taught me a lot, just moving and functioning, how to pivot, how to quote unquote code switch from time to time to be able to move in those spaces. So I definitely agree with my fellow panelists.
Thank you all for sharing. Our next question says, since the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and many others, many companies have made commitments to diversity initiatives. In your experience, how have the conversations around racial issues changed in the last few years? And what conversations should be happening in the workplace?
I'll take that one. At Truist, I'll be honest with you, before all the murders, killings happened, we had 0 in terms of conversation. And after those things started happening, the floodgates just opened. Our CEO at the time, Kelly King, he came out and Kelly said, he didn't understand the full aspect of everything that was going on. But after these things happened, it opened up his eyes and it changed the culture of our organization. He came out, and you can look it up in the Charlotte Observer. He had a long article just talking about, they did some research talking about the history of our predecessor bank and how they supported businesses who participated in the slave trade. He had those types of conversations and he issued an apology on behalf of the bank. He pledged, I think it was $60 billion over the next, during the 3-year span for low to moderate income neighborhoods. The whole culture changed. We started having what we call business resource groups that came together. And we not only talked about race, but we talked about gender equity. We talked about LGBTQ, talked about that community, the violence against our Asian American counterparts out there. I mean, the whole discussion opened. And what we found was that a lot of our teammates who really didn't pay attention to the issues, they're now paying attention to it because their fellow teammates are the ones who are speaking during these business resource groups, and they're talking about their experiences. And so they're having empathy. They're a lot more empathetic now that they know, oh, okay, James talked about this, he talked about that. Now I get it, I can relate to it more, as opposed to someone being on TV talking about it. It makes a big difference. So I just applaud our organization and what they've done to raise this issue. We've hired a diversity individual who leads the entire organization in terms of these initiatives. And I'm proud of my institution for what they've done in response to all of this.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you for your response. It's good to see corporations actually recognizing issues and then taking action and supporting their employees and the community around them.
Thank you.
Look, maybe just to add, like I think these murders, really represented a blatant disregard for Black lives. And this has been an issue that's been voiced around the country for centuries, frankly, and decades, and I think the heinous nature of it on a public stage forced it to be maybe more undeniable to many. But I think that the irony is, the fact that this created that level of shock and disbelief and, what we would call an awakening across the country is actually the problem, right? The fact that folks have been expressing these issues for quite some time to no avail really represents the problem. And, while, I think that it's certainly opened the door to conversation. So, we take progress in any way that we get it. What felt new to many, was draining on the folks that were actually being impacted the worst by it. And so, I think there's like this balance in that conversation, right? Because, folks that have been, exposed and had been victims to these experiences, it's important for, our voices to be heard in that conversation, but it's also draining. It's mentally draining. It's trauma that has to be revisited for the education of others, and revisited for the education of others in ways where folks aren't necessarily equipped to help you sort through that trauma once you open it up, right? And I think that a lot of that is lost on folks, during these conversations. So, I think it's all positive in the intent, and I think there is progress as a result of these conversations. But I still think even in the process of that, I think there's an opportunity to center the folks who have actually been experiencing this, and making sure that we're doing it in a way that's thoughtful and not creating more damage through that reliving the trauma that folks have to share through stories and experiences.
Absolutely. Thank you.
To add quickly from the entrepreneurial aspect, it's just me. So my conversations are my conversations, and they've always been the same. They'll remain the same. And I am true to a fault in who I am and very confident in the Black woman that I am. My 9 to 5, unfortunately, the conversations haven't really changed. Diversity has always been a topic, but I think what needs to be changed is that some people have a very narrow view of what diversity, only how the diversity includes them. And if anything, I think we need to widen the lens of that diversity to truly be all inclusive. And if I would add anything, that's the biggest thing, in letting the thing be the thing and not just being selfish with the diversity. And, there's enough room at the table, and we can make it to where everyone is welcome and feels safe at that table.
Yes.
Well said, Brenda.
Thank you. Danielle, did you want to add anything as well?
Yeah, sure. And, I work in the healthcare sector. So when these conversations, like in many workplaces, really started picking up, in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd last summer and some of the other things that were caught on tape, I think one of the things that it forced a lot of healthcare organizations to think about, and I think this goes to Brenda's point about thinking about diversity and inclusion in the broadest sense, was, we obviously had a lot of conversations amongst ourselves, kind of like what James was describing, like, we're in these peer groups. And I found myself feeling very much what Mishak was expressing, which is like exhausted. I found myself feeling, I don't really want this burden this week. But there was another set of conversations that I think it spurred in a lot of these organizations around how are we engaging with our patients, customers, communities around these issues, and what role can we play in changing that? So I think when James talks about, the bank making $60 million in investments and stuff, I think a lot of companies started having that conversation. And so in healthcare, for us, when we talk about something like implicit bias, that shows up in the delivery of healthcare in this country, right? We currently have a crisis of maternal health in certain minority women populations. And a lot of that has to do with women showing up to the doctor's office, and maybe the doctors don't hear their complaints the same way because they're making assumptions. And so we had a very active conversation, not just about diversity in our four walls, but about in our communities, patients, others that we are caring about. And I actually found it easier to engage in that set of conversations, because the other set of conversations at the time felt too personal. And to be honest, it felt like a tax that I didn't want to have to pay in the workplace during that period in time. So both the previous speakers' comments really resonate with me.
Yeah, I totally can relate to that. And actually at the time in our company, we hadn't had any employee resource groups, other than for women. And that one was about a year old. That was where the company was on its journey. I actually took, this time specifically to sort of reach out virtually, given the COVID nature, to all the Black professionals that I knew, really as more of a check-in to see how folks were doing, and giving them a safe space to have a conversation and talk through it. And the first one we had was scheduled for an hour and took 2 hours, and we scheduled 2 hours and it took 3 hours. So like that was the temperature of the team. That's what people needed, and it was ranging everywhere from folks' experiences in their neighborhood with neighbors, to experiences with peers, to the bosses. And really just it was just an opportunity for them to express how they were feeling in a safe space, and know that they weren't experiencing it on their own. And so that over time evolved into our employee resource group for Black professionals within the company. And we really talked and made a concerted effort to talk about, what are the things that we want to focus on impacting within the company. And, as we talked about the opportunity, it was, framed as recruiting, professional development, improving sort of cultural awareness within the company. In addition, thinking about supplier diversity and how we do more, partner more with a diverse set of suppliers, and then also community engagement and making sure that, and community partnerships, and making sure that we were doing things within the communities that we serve to give back to those communities. So it was fortunately very much aligned with the company's overarching mission around this idea of belonging and having a positive impact on the community and the world. And so we wanted to make sure that the voice of the Black professionals within that community, was heard within that. And then, I continue to work with the Women's Network to do some joint efforts, right? Because ultimately we really, to your point, wanted to expand it further and further, across the organization with this idea of belonging, right? Everyone as an individual, being able to bring their best selves into the work environment and feeling a sense of belonging, sort of one, marginalized group at a time. So that was some of the things that we had done subsequent from this period of time.
Thank you for your responses. Get to ask the third question. This question is primarily for Brenda, but we welcome others to weigh in. With the movement to recognize Black-owned businesses, what positive outcomes have you seen? And have there been any unintended negative consequences?
I think the biggest positive is that people are actually supporting Black businesses. Black businesses are not a secondary thought. They're not a last option. We have a lot to offer. And because of that, in the past, a lot of business owners may have thought they underpriced themselves because they don't think that they are, have the quality or product that a lot of people have. I'm a victim of that myself. My friends tell me all the time, you need to raise your prices. But it's a part of not feeling like you're as worthy as other businesses may seem. So myself, along with others, people are taking themselves as we are, top tier when it comes to business owners and having something to offer. I think the only negative is not knowing people's true intention. People are quick to post a Black square and protest, but that's the only thing they do to really support the community or a business. And so, supporting a Black owned business equaling the same token of why I have Black friends is not really the type of, level we want in regards to support. Let it be genuine. If you have questions, ask questions, but let it be from the heart, from your genuine support. Be that we have something that you truly love to offer and you truly want to share, not just something to show that, to get people off your back in regards to what you're doing. But it's been a lot of opportunities, scholarships and grants that are more available now, and resources that weren't available before that are available now. So I think it's a great thing that people are talking, and I love that our community is actually stepping up to the plate to provide even more things to talk about. And so it's really great.
Thank you.
Can I touch on that? At Truist, we've made a concerted effort to have more partnerships with the HBCUs out there in terms of recruiting students directly. We've really ramped up our efforts there. Supplier diversity has been something that we've allocated about $100 million towards. So that's really helped. And you would think that, I guess a potential negative would be, okay, you're doing this, but you're taking away from other programs that you had in place because of what's going on socially. And it was quite the opposite at Truist. I mean, they looked at the numbers and they're actually giving more because we were two different banks and we merged together, and they did an analysis of all the spending. And we actually gave the same to the folks who were giving it to before, but by combining, we were able to give more towards other causes of the diverse nature. So it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I think I think to truly support Black businesses, I think funding is important, but I think guidance, network, perspective, those sort of things are equally important, if not more important. I think funding gives you extra time to sort of survive and realize, maybe the idea that you're working through, or you can maybe extend it a little bit longer. So it's important. It's extremely important, right? Most businesses fail for lack of funding, right? But having a clear strategy, being able to have access to a network of folks that, you can get the right prices of goods, the right lead times of goods so that you can deliver a competitive product. I think those things are equally or as important, in some instances more important. I think that can be underwhelmed. And then I also think that, the fundamental, the systemic challenge is that, Black businesses statistically and historically, are paying higher rates for loans, have less access to loans, right? So there's a problem where there's a fundamentally higher risk placed on a Black-owned business, not necessarily because on paper they're saying they're Black-owned, but that's the outcome, right? And that outcome is not coincidental. And so I think that needs to be explored more, so that it's great to give something extra to, but we should explore the reasons why this biased outcome is happening, and fix the systemic issue, so that these businesses can compete on the same level with the same rules in a fair playing field and get equal outcomes for the same effort. Right. That's my view on that.
I absolutely agree. Thank you for your responses.
You're on mute, Amaya.
muted.
You're on mute. Yeah.
So sorry, my
No
apologies.
worries.
Our next question is one that I'm super interested to hear all of your thoughts on, and I believe all of us would like to hear your advice for this topic. Polarizing topics will not always be front and center in the workplace. How do you prepare for conversations when they arise?
I'll go. I think just being open. listening to different points of views, not having a predetermined position. And you may actually learn something by being open-minded, and just making sure the other person feels heard at the end of the day. You know, regardless of what they're saying, a lot of people just want to be heard and understood. So I just think, you know, just taking a step back, setting your agenda to the side, and actually listening. And heck, take notes. I mean, that's one of the things that I've always done, was just take notes. The more you take notes, the more you remember what the other person's saying. You're less apt to start talking when they're talking, because you're actually listening and recording it. So I think that puts the other person at ease. And whether or not, you know, you have the solution for the person, they're going to feel better about that conversation because you actually took the time to listen and perhaps take some notes on the situation.
Yeah, my perspective on this is just, I think part of the trick in the workplace is figuring out what's the right place and time to have a polarizing conversation. So, and the answer is almost never as soon as it's happening because, you know, emotions are a little high, you know, you may, you know, need to go back and kind of reflect, like, you know, what you're saying. But so I think part of the trick is one, is this a workplace that creates spaces to have those kinds of conversations? So for instance, and this isn't a story from my current workplace, but I can think of another workplace I was in. There was, you know, there were pretty heated conversations about diversity in hiring and how the organization was doing on that score. And, you know, people wanted to sort of, you know, have those conversations in town hall settings where everybody's there. And so part of what we in that workplace really had to think about is sort of, well, if we want to actually address the problem, as opposed to just creating a scene, sort of how do you have the conversation? What group of people do you want to have in the room? You know, how do you know, do you want to use someone as a mediator? But those are the kind of questions I think that in a lot of workplaces, it's just as important. You know, James talked about how you have the conversation, but when and in what forum and with what group of people is something that I think is important as well.
My current workplace, I don't think is ready to have those types of conversations. You know, everything's about timing and everyone's not on the same page. And it's a very new concept for a lot of people. And getting out of that comfort zone takes a certain level of safety. And my office at my daytime job is a pretty safe space. Everyone feels very comfortable to come and talk. I'm the benefits lady. I have to, you know, make people feel at ease, whether it's they recently got a diagnosis that they're not happy with and they need to figure out how to plan their affairs, or they just lost a spouse, or they're going through a divorce. So empathizing and sympathizing with people at their level and meeting people where they are, I think it's the easiest way to have those conversations. We don't know everything. Every situation is different. It's a case by case. And so I think if you go into things with the open mind, and like Mr. James said, communication is great, but the biggest part of communication is listening. And I think a lot of people hear a lot, but they don't listen to everything. And that's what we need to focus on.
I think that was all really well said. You know, highlighting, you know, both what you know, Ms. Reeves and Brenda, Ms. Young said. I actually had written down from 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. You know, the first one being seek to understand, then be understood. And I think that that's very true. And I do think that the underlying you know, attribute to be able to do that is empathy, as you know, Brenda stated. You know, for me personally, you know, I do try to focus on intent and practice empathy in all conversations. I do my best to. I'm still human, so I fall short of my best often. But you know, for me, I'm in that conversation, in all conversations, I'm trying to consider what I intend to accomplish during that conversation. Right? Am I trying to just share information? Am I trying to receive information? Am I trying to vent, get something off my chest? do I care if the person or people on the other end receive what I'm sharing, right? It's like being honest about yourself, be honest with yourself about, what are you truly trying to get out of this conversation, to me is a lot of where it starts with. Because look, sometimes you may want to say, look, I don't really care if you receive it. I just want to say it and move on. Well, we'll be happy with that. And if they didn't receive it, don't be disappointed because you didn't deliver it in a way for someone to receive it, right? So that's what I mean when I say, being intentional about that conversation. And if you really do want someone to receive it, then that's where, to me, empathy comes in, and really trying to communicate in an effective way and try to understand, truly what the person or people on the other side are trying to get across as well. We all have our own biases. That's not something you're going to eliminate. It's more about being conscious of it. And then the other part of it, to me, and it's a big part of the ability to empathize, is this idea of trust. And so having some people within a circle that you do trust, that you can kind of check in with, that you can bounce things off. Things like this, courageous conversations, a great opportunity, right, to be able to sort of explore thoughts that are helpful to you and give you context, so that as you go into other conversations that you typically didn't expect before they happened, I think it's just more helpful, to then be prepared to navigate through those. At least that's sort of been my experience.
Thank you all for your responses. I know that even in the classrooms, we deal with situations like these from time to time, and I really appreciate your guidance and how to navigate these spaces and moments. So we're a little ahead of schedule, but at this time, we're going to transition to breakout rooms. In room 1 will be JK and Danielle with Amaya, and in room 2 will be Brenda, Mishak, and I. You'll be prompted on your screen to select one of the breakout rooms. In this breakout room, we will start with questions. If there are no questions, the panelists will ask a few questions to start a small group discussion. And then after about 25 minutes, we'll all return to the large group for final comments.
I hope you all had amazing conversations in the breakout rooms, but it is now time for our final question of the evening. So panelists, in 1 or 2 sentences, if we want to be intentionally inclusive, what recommendations do you have for us as attendees?
I'd say, just as we've been talking about all night, just be open, be willing to learn new things, and not, be so closed-minded, and just be like a sponge, be like a kid again, and just welcome others with open arms is the advice that I would give.
I would agree. Being open, welcome, honest conversation, and not being afraid of feedback. A lot of times it's okay to be just heard, but there are certain situations where it needs to be a dialogue and feedback is necessary. So being open and receptive of honest conversation, and I think we can move forward in a lot of areas.
I think it starts with being honest about why you should be inclusive. And I think, there's number after number of stats that tell you that, teams and outcomes are always better when more inputs are included in it. So keeping that in mind, then to me, it really is about, when you're in an organization or when you're on a team, when you're communicating, in a conversation, considering the folks that might be more marginalized in that conversation, that might traditionally be more marginalized. If it's a company, policies, procedures, things like work from home, everyone, this is made for the majority typically, by definition, and so you ignore the minority in that instance. But if you want more diverse environments, then you have to focus more on the minority when considering those things. And that's not a natural thing to do.
I have nothing new to contribute. I agree with what everyone would say. I guess the big one I would call out is just really be willing to listen and learn.
Thank you, panelists. I really appreciate you all, as I've said several times. Once again, we're a little ahead of schedule, but at this time, at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Dean Sandy Vinoy, and she's going to say a few closing remarks for us.
Great, thank you so much. I have the honor of bringing us to a close this evening, and I am Sandy Vinoy, Interim Dean in the Walker College of Business. And I just want to say thanks so much to our panel for your time and sharing your important and thoughtful insights, and our student moderators. Thank you for guiding the conversation with these great questions. And to our Inclusive Excellence team, I can't leave you out because you work so hard on this, and you work so hard on so many things for our college and our Inclusive Excellence efforts. I have been really impressed with the honest dialogue tonight. And things won't change unless we're willing to step out of our comfort zone and have these courageous conversations. So again, thank you everyone for being here, and I wish you all a wonderful evening.